When my name was flashed on the screen, the scene blinded me, as if I had stepped into my own X-ray and seen the skeleton of my reputation. The orchestra fell silent, the glasses froze, the host held out the statuette, Patron of the Year, and I thought only about whether my tie was sitting straight and whether my watch was not too shiny. I learned to hold the audience in the palm of my hand. You smile, shrug your shoulders a little, nod, and you are no longer a person, but a symbol. I took a step forward and at that moment the screen burst into black sparks. A new video sequence covered the ceremony like a fire curtain. No logos, no warnings, just my face from the surveillance cameras and a transfer table, where not music was embedded, but sums with a shadow. People were not breathing, and I listened to my own voice from the recording, where it was someone else's. Transfer through the third fund, make it look like humanitarian aid. This is a montage, I whispered into the microphone, but the whisper came out as an admission. Sir, should I turn off the broadcast? The technician leaned forward. Try it. No one moved, because movement meant choice. In the front row sat my mother, as straight as a pin, and her gaze slid over me as if she were trying on a simple suit of shame and couldn't decide if it was my size. My former partner, Arson, didn't lower his eyes. He looked wide and almost gentle, like a doctor taking off his gloves before announcing a diagnosis. You knew, I whispered. You too, he replied. The video continued, audio of my brief instructions, consolidated accounts, a map of the flows between my foundations and the companies that were the gaskets, where the skin of charity fell off each amount. I heard laughter that wasn't laughter, more like a wheeze of beaten air. Cancel payment, I said on the recording, cover it up through the press office, I repeated, each word hitting me in the face as if I were being filmed in close-up under blinding lights. This is a provocation, I said into the microphone, now aloud. My lawyers. Your accounts have already been frozen, came another voice from the stage, official and bloodless, and I recognized the intonations of the state investigator standing near the wings. Please stay where you are. The music didn't turn back on. The cameras didn't blink. I saw one of the waitresses look up and look away as if I had whispered something obscene to her. Mom slowly took the evening's program from her lap, folded it in half, and placed it on a chair as if she were hiding a bad postcard. Arson took a half step back, and I finally understood why his gaze was gentle. He was no longer fighting me. I stood under the warm spotlights, but inside it became cold, like in an empty bank safe. I took a step towards the microphone to say something right, wise, saving, but all the languages of the world dissolved in my head, except for one, a child's, where there are only two words, don't let go. And I felt that I had already let go. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room that seemed too clean for someone who had lost everything. The phone was silent. Social media was screaming. The newspapers were writing, a philanthropist built an empire on fraud. My photo was everywhere, enlarged, cropped, distorted. People were arguing in the comments whether it was me, as if my life had become a public exhibit in a hall labeled shame. I sat in front of the mirror and tried to figure out when it all broke. Was it when I first let my accountant move a number to avoid taxes? Or when I accepted a bribe disguised as an investment? Each time I told myself that I was doing it for good, to build schools, help hospitals, maintain a foundation. But now all those good deeds had turned into proof that even the purest idea can stink when mixed with money. The call. We need to talk, said the voice of my partner Arson. You betrayed me. I saved myself. And maybe you. If you listen. We met in the underground parking lot. His car was parked next to the column, its headlights off. He looked tired but calm, like a man who had long known how it would end. Everything that happened was no accident, he said. You were set up, but not from the outside. Your people. Your secretary, your advisor, the lawyer you trusted. They had been playing against you for a year. And I was in the middle of it. In the middle of what? Between their threats and your silence. They leaked the data to journalists to clear themselves of suspicion. And you became the scapegoat. His words tore my brain in two. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want to drown with you. But now, either you fight, or you'll just be wiped out. He handed me a flash drive. Here are copies of the correspondence. If you publish this, half of the capital will fall. But remember, after this, there will be no going back. I took it, although I understood that at that very moment I was making a choice not in my favor, but in favor of revenge. In the following days, I became a ghost in my own city. I was kicked out of offices, bank employees averted their eyes, security guards wouldn't even let me into the houses that I had once financed. The press tore me to pieces, and I remained silent. Not because I had no answer, but because every word would be just gasoline for this fire. And when I finally dared to return home, I was met only by emptiness. My wife had gone to her parents, my son had been taken to school abroad. Her letter lay in the kitchen, without anger, without regret. I believed in you until I realized that you only believed in your own legend. You are not God. You are a businessman who has forgotten what conscience is. That night I sat on the floor of my empty house, turning the flash drive in my hands. Between my fingers was the whole truth that could either save me or burn everything that was left. And for the first time in many years I felt fear. Not of loss, but of the fact that, perhaps for the first time in my life, I would have to be honest. When the lie crumbles, there is nothing left. And only then do you see who you really are. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. The flash drive lay on the table like a ticking bomb, my face, exhausted and empty, was reflected in the metal of its case. I inserted it into my laptop several times, then took it out, as if testing my own courage. But on the 3rd night I couldn't stand it. The screen lit up the room, and I opened the first file. It wasn't just correspondence. There were orders, black budgets, signatures of people whose faces I saw on television every day. I read, and my fingers trembled, ministers, businessmen, journalists, judges, all of them intertwined in a scheme bigger than my worst suspicions. And I, with my funds, was just a link, a screen with which they covered up their billions. I thought I controlled everything, but it turned out I was simply being used. Then she wrote to me. We have to meet. You don't understand what you've discovered. L. I didn't recognize the name, but the words had weight, as if they were written by someone who could see right through me. We met at night, on the roof of an old bank. The wind was cold, the city lights flickered like the instruments on a sinking ship. Who are you? I asked. I used to work for your fund. No way. You wouldn't even remember me. I was silent. I really didn't remember her face. Hundreds of people passed through my office, each one wanting only something. I was gathering evidence. Not against you, against them. But I can't do anything without you. You were the key. They made you an enemy to cover their own bodies. And what do you want? So that you don't run away. You can reveal everything. And if they destroy me? They've already destroyed you, she said quietly. Now you only have one thing left, the truth. We sat on the edge of the roof, looking down at the police patrols. She showed me the documents, the same ones on the flash drive, but supplemented with copies of court orders, official signatures, letters between ministers. She had everything that could break the system. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because I once believed in you. And I saw that you could still be what you wanted to be. Not a benefactor for the cameras, but a person who would actually save someone. Her words struck deeper than any condemnation. I realized that I could still do something real, not for the press, not for myself, but simply because there would be no point in doing otherwise. She handed me an envelope. Inside are the contacts of journalists you can trust. If you decide to go public, make it public. But do it quickly. They're already looking for you. When she left, I was alone on the roof, with the wind whispering like a confession. I was shivering, not from the cold, but from the fear of my own truth. I knew this was my last chance. To betray the shadow and become myself. Sometimes an ally comes not from the future, but from the moment you first stopped being human. The next morning I was no longer afraid. For the first time in a long time, I put on a simple black shirt instead of an expensive suit. Surprisingly, the fabric felt lighter than the armor of lies I had worn for years. I looked at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself, not a businessman, not a patron of the arts, not a scandal hero, but simply a man with nothing to lose. I met Lotta in the old newspaper office, which smelled of dust and coffee, and the windows were taped over with yellow sheets so that no one could see who was inside. She was already waiting, with a laptop, a dictaphone, and trembling hands. Hundreds of files, documents, correspondence, audio recordings, everything that could erase dozens of high-profile names from the political map, flickered on the screen. "Are you sure?" she asked when I signed the permission to publish. "After this, you won't even have a name left." "The name is not what destroyed me," I answered. "The silence killed me." We pressed send. And at that second time was divided into before and after. The inscription appeared on the screen, transmission completed. That was it. There was no going back. The news was the first to react. Then the ministries. Then the internet. Millions of views, thousands of comments. And in the midst of all this, my video message. I spoke without pathos, without excuses. I simply confessed. I told how we were bought, how we sold ourselves. I did not call for revolutions and did not play the hero. I simply admitted that the truth is more expensive at any cost. And then, they came. Black cars without license plates, short walkie-talkies, people in coats who had no names. I stood at the window and watched them get out, how they disperse along the entrance, as someone showed a photo, my photo. Lotta grabbed my hand. "There's a black exit, we'll make it." "No. If I run away now, everything will lose its meaning again." I went out to meet them. The corridor seemed longer than any road in my life. One of the agents looked me straight in the eye and said briefly, "You knew you were warned." "Yes. But keeping quiet is worse." They put me in a car, handcuffed me. But strangely enough, I wasn't ashamed. Somewhere deep down, I felt that I had done something right. And when the car started moving, I saw through the glass Lotta standing at the entrance, holding a phone, the screen of which flashed hundreds of messages. She smiled. Not at me, at the world, which had finally seen the truth. That evening I was officially accused of disclosing state secrets. The news showed only a short clip, me in handcuffs, with a gloomy face. But no one knew that for the first time in years, there was no fear beneath that face. I thought I was fighting for an empire, but it turned out I was fighting for my soul. And perhaps for the first time in my life, I won. 100 days had passed. 100 days without calls, without noise, without power. The prison cell became my only office, and the cold wall my mirror. I learned to listen to the silence. At first it cut like glass, but later it began to sound more honest than any orchestra of my former banquets. The trial was still going on, but I knew, the verdict had already been written not by the judges, but by time. Everything had changed on the outside. The people who stood next to me on the stages and shared glasses now refused even to remember. Everyone was saving themselves, everyone was rewriting history as if I had never existed. And I was not angry. I used to do the same thing. One morning I was handed an envelope without a return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping. In the photo, Lotta was standing in front of microphones, the journalist who exposed the political corruption of the year. The caption was in small letters, materials provided by an anonymous source. I smiled. She had kept her word. And now her truth lived for me. That evening I sat for a long time by the bars and looked at the moonlight that filtered through the narrow window. It seemed like the only currency that could not be stolen. I remembered how I had once counted money as if it were the days of my life. Now I counted my breaths, and each one seemed fuller than all those years of luxury. A priest came to me, young, with tired eyes. "Are you sorry?" he asked. I was silent for a long time. "No," I replied. "But I'm not proud either. I just accept it." "Do you still believe in God?" "If he exists somewhere, it must be in that part of me that I finally didn't sell." He left, and I was left alone. In the darkness, I suddenly remembered my mother's words: "Poverty is not when there is no money. It is when the conscience is silent, and the heart says, yes, in someone else's voice." And for the first time I understood what she meant. My sentence was announced a week later, 7 years of imprisonment. But I took it not as the end, but as purification. Everything that was built on lies collapsed, and under the ruins I finally saw the foundation, the real, human one. When I was led down the corridor after the hearing, journalists shouted questions, cameras flashed, but I looked straight ahead. Not to escape, to a new beginning. And somewhere in the crowd I saw her, Lotta. She only nodded slightly. And that was enough to understand, I did not burn in vain. We are born twice, the first time, when we gain life, the second time, when we lose everything and start living according to the truth. And maybe I'm not rich anymore. But this time, I'm real.